Welcome to the Performance Health Podcast. My name is Ted Curry. Today we have Coach Henry Barrera over at the University of Alabama coming in talking about how he approaches programming. Love this episode. I love talking to Coach. I love making all these inroads with his process, his decision making. He's going to be in for an absolute amazing ride. If you like what you're listening to, head over to strength&conditioningcoach.com. I got an assortment of things that I think will really benefit you as a coach. One, my latest book and my number one book, Training Sports Teams. This book is going to change the way you write programs forever, and I'm not underplaying that whatsoever. This book is everything you need and principles from all logistics and actually program design. If you're a strength coach working with large groups, you need this book right now. Have my collective membership, which is weekly meetings, discussions, everything in terms of program design, nutrition supplementation, networking, career development, business planning strategy. It's your complete resource for you working every single day, no matter what sector, high school, college, pro. We have them all. And everyone is contributing, everyone's talking, everyone's working through all of these great concepts that we need to understand, unpack as we learn and grow as coaches. And the final would be my muscle mentorship and level 1 certification, both here at Allegiant Guilford. This is going to be muscle mentorship May 11th to May 13th. You premium event and all strength conditioning. Hello. Got Coach Henry on today, man. Appreciate you. Thank you for taking the time. I'm going to come out swinging right now. Walk me through your process of writing a program. Where do you start and what does that look like for you? You got your off-season coming up here. Give us some sort of idea how you start your off-season program.
Yeah, man, I'm probably going to give you a different answer. I teach and coach in acronyms and alliterations and things that are sticky. So I'm gonna kind of pretend like you're a recruit family coming in, and I'm gonna walk you through what we do. So I got this process I call the 3D process: discover, develop, and deliver. Discover is all the assessment pieces from if you use FMS, Fusionetics, can you squat, lunge, reach, rotate? Can you hit requisite ranges? We do like an orthopedic assessment as well. That's our sports medicine team, Clark Holter. So that's all our discover. Think of that like even combine type stuff, speed, agility, force place, everything. And then develop is kind of the program prescription. That's I have 3 buckets in that: build, strong, and explode. Basically that's, hypertrophy is the build, strong is getting guys a little bit, more force dominant, and then explode is, guys that need explosiveness. We're working on that. And man, where I'm at, the guys that come in here, they're pretty explosive. They're already good. So we're just tweaking little things there. And then deliver, that's how we manage it day to day. From force plates to internal, external load tracking, that's how we make adjustments in the day to day. So we can dig into any, you can take it any direction you want, but that's kind of a 10,000 foot view on how I look at it.
Yeah, let's go in more discover. And you mentioned a couple of different systems like an FMS. And one of the things that I was kind of curious about, and I think this is also the adoption of some of these systems into your training program, is that how much of an influence is, let's just say, do an FMS or an FRA or any kind of force plate analysis on your program? Because, something I worked through with some coaches, they already wrote the program and then they do the evaluation. Well, you already know what you're going to do. Just do what you're going to do. So walk through that evolution of integrating some of these things, and how long did it take to actually start making some big changes to your program once you got that information?
Man, so I think I'm going to go back first. So I started with the school of FMS, Greg Cook and the seven different tests. I think the longer you do this, and you want to have objective feedback, but man, can you squat? Can you lunge? Can you reach? Can you rotate? Can you hit requisite ranges? So I've gotten to the point where, we do joint by joint assessments, and you have, dorsiflexion, plantar flexion, how much, what's the range there? I don't really do as much of that anymore. Probably the best system that I've used for me personally, in my opinion, is Fusionetics. I think, they have some AI capabilities where you can literally film it, track it, that kind of thing. But man, yes, just at this point, Fusionetics is what we use the last couple of years here at Bama. But I'm open to the conversation of FMS and what that does. For me, I'm good enough with the video of an athlete squatting where I can have a before and after. And I can take coach's eye if I want, and I can break that down and say, hey, man, we got a little more range here. Whether that's truncation or whatever you want to look at, you can look at it and assess it. Here's the before, here's the after. What do we do in between that? What do we do after that as a prescriptive, process?
So let's just go into Fusionetics a little bit. In terms of like using that evaluation of an AI-based deliverable in terms of their biomechanics unloaded in an organic environment, when it gets to the point of, okay, these things are the focal points you need to focus on, whether it's ankle dorsal flexion or motor control, or just, hey, this is going to be a problem down the road because you're looking to have muscular balances. And all of that probably stems from the old school NASM approach of the idea that if like they can't go a deep squat or single leg squat, there's probably something going on from structural balance, et cetera, et cetera. But the note though, one thing that I think most people got hung up on with FMS is the idea that it's going to be restricted to what the program that you're going to do already, right? And that note of, why do I do FMS? It's just tell me not to squat. Well, why is that a problem? And I always kind of wondered about that because, my element, when I started talking to coaches about do they utilize FMS or not, was the fact that they felt limited by it. And I never looked at it that way, but I want to talk about how you're utilizing Fusionetics and maybe looking at a joint by joint approach of, is it a matter of like provocation of like, I want to figure out, is something going to hurt and I want to avoid doing that? Or is it a refinement of it's now whittling into probably the best exercise and subsequently the best progression? How does that like now dovetail into the next phase of your program?
Yeah, for sure, man. That's a great question. So, a great thought even. So Clark Holder and myself, we're linked, man. We talk about 30 times a day about all of our athletes, what we're seeing. So he does more of the joint range stuff because there's different components to the Fusionetics program, right? You can go through and just take them through the actual squat, lunge, single leg, internal, external rotation, upper body, and basically it gives you a visual picture of like, hey, here's the asymmetry on the left side, right side, et cetera, et cetera. For me, what that does is they have their algorithm. They spit out and say, hey, this guy's going to do, 10 reps on his right side, 4 on his left. And they're kind of just, building their framework for it. So for me, I take that and I say, how can I integrate or what do you feel? To me, it's a partnership with an athlete of like, are we making progress in this stuff? And some of this stuff, like there's an old school FMS, like rehab type matrix. You go through and you have your, active single leg raise and all this stuff. To me, I'm not totally convinced all that stuff works. Like what's the bang for your buck on that? So for me, as I start building programs, it's what am I seeing when a guy does a deadlift or when we squat or, if we have a goblet squat is one of the things in the Fusionetics is like, what is the foot doing? Is it, externally rotating? Is it internally rotating? Is the pinky coming up? And you get to start to see those things and kind of get a little more granular with what you're doing with an individual athlete. So that's how I use it, and it's just kind of another layer of performance lens.
Now, you mentioned in terms of Discover that you look at some of the more biomotor qualities of like speed and power.
Mm-hmm.
How are those two overlapping, right? So say Fusionetics says that this person might have some severe imbalances. Are you avoiding or maybe negating doing a like sprint test or a vertical jump test which biomechanically might be too much for that person to handle? Or is that, hey, we're going to go through this and see what their tolerance is and maybe try to put some constraints on it? Like, how are you evaluating that? Or is it just we're going to do the full assessment regardless? And then we now.
Yeah, we're gonna do the full assessment, man. I have so many thoughts in my head, Tim. So look, I have this right in front of me. I've read all your books, man, and I've been really challenged by them. So I'm gonna tell a quick story, man. I was working at Nike. I was there 7 years, and we had some of the best athletes on the planet come in, NBA guys. And I'm not gonna use any names, but I mean these are superstars, man, the best of the best. And they took the FMS, and they didn't score well, And I was like, oh man, I'm a young strength coach then. This is, 15, 20 years ago. And I'm like, well, what are we going to do? And the guy said, we're going to train. The hell do you think we're going to do? We're going to train, So they used it as a filter and that was it, like this is going to give us a little information. We'll come back and address some things. But that opened my eyes where, sometimes, you get a young strength coach and hey, he scored 11 on the FMS. Like we're going to do all correctives for the next 4 weeks. I don't know about that. I think I want to watch them run. I want to watch them play and I want to make my own assessment subjectively on paper. And then I'm going to have a conversation with an athlete. How do you feel? What's your left knee feel like? You know, and start building out from there. So to me, there's got to be layers to it. And that guides, how we do it. It's a partnership, a hand-in-hand relationship of like tweaking on the go.
For that, we'll go into now the develop aspect, because I think this is a important segue. You developed a supercomputer mind in terms of seeing something that's not going to work and knowing how to adjust. And one of the things that I find is so difficult to parlay to someone working under you or someone who's trying to really learn from you is this. I'm using instinct a lot of, that's not working. At least it's not doing what I want it to do. I'm going to go another direction. So in those moments, have you ever sat down and thought, okay, well, we're going to get the training regardless if it's on 11 and half a mass or some of these things. And what are you building in terms of contingencies and not working? What's the red flag that you're like, okay, I'm not going to do that anymore? Is it pain? Is it some sort of limitation? Is it some sort of biomechanical thing? What are your roadblocks? And then what did you plan therefore afterwards?
I like how you phrase that. So if someone's working with me, I have an intern, a GA, whatever, which I do now. Again, man, acronyms and alliterations. I'm gonna give you 2 F's: filters and frameworks. All right. Frameworks is your academic and your formal learning, what you learn in a textbook and in class. And then your filter is your experience and your intuition and how you see things with your coach's eye. Right. So I'm going to challenge, whoever's working with me to have a pretty good base of fundamental principles, man. So for me, I have 3 of them: master movement to maximize power, progressive and strategic overload, and finding thresholds. So thresholds, an example of that is like, hey, we're going to goblet squat. Okay, what's it look like? Ankle, knee, hip, thoracic. Those are my filters. I can see them by now. And then I'm going to ask an intern or a GA, what do you see? And then we'll have that conversation. And then most importantly, you talked about pain a little bit. I'm always going to ask an athlete, you have pressure or pain where you think you shouldn't? And then tell me about that. That I had a group in this morning. We had some snatch grip high pulls, and we had some deadlifts, Romanian deadlifts. The way I explain it to those guys is these things are connected. They're cousins, they're family. So we're working on an explosive piece, and then we're going to reinforce that with a more static piece. So that's kind of how I see it. The filter is really important to me. What you see, what you hear, and what you feel. I think as a coach, if you have that feel piece, the filter, it makes your life 100 times easier, 1,000 times easier to see things, to communicate, and to connect with athletes. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but dig in on it, man.
It does. It does. And one of the things that you talked about was one of your 3 filters within the actual development is the progression or progressive overload. When you make a change, how are you at that period going, okay, I'm going to make a mental note, or I'm going to write this down, I'm going to change the exercise into the next week, right? So there's going to be some sort of either increasing weight or increasing like total volume, whatever it's going to be from one week to the next. But you made a change, and that comes quite, you might went with flat board, or you might want like a counterbalance, or you might want with finger leg variation. And then it goes into the next week. Okay, now we're going to face the fact that we have a filter of progressive overload, but we did an amendment to the workout the previous week, which I think it's just a challenge for all of us. A lot of me, myself included. So I'm kind of asking for myself of like the ability to keep tabs on week-to-week changes and now follow it with the almighty progressive overload on the back end.
Yeah, man. If you've ever watched this play, I literally keep a journal on the bench. Like journaling has been a huge part of my life, man. I've been writing things down. Maybe I'm not smart enough to remember it, but if a guy falls, if he steps wrong on his left foot, it's probably in my journal, So for me, I either have these note cards, like literally just got done with the workout. I have a couple notes on this card. I have my journal. I keep everything in, and it's a conversation again with an athlete of, hey, man, I noticed this in the workout. Hey, coach, today we don't typically use straps. One kid was coach, man, my grip today, I'm not feeling it. I'm like, hey, have you ever used straps before? We're going to try this out, see how you feel. Maybe it's not just fatigue. Maybe it's something else. Put some straps on them. Hey, I love this. It was way easier, obviously. But, so yeah, little things like that. And then I'll write that down. Hey, so-and-so used straps, liked how they felt. Might explore this a little bit more. Might ask them later, what'd you do last night? How's fatigue? You know, we know grip strength and all that is correlation to, you know, rest and readiness and all that.
So I mean, that's a teachable moment right now, because when you go through that now explanation of the GA, maybe, and that's the thing I think is so hard about, like, you're giving the hypothetical about your program, about what you would do in a sterile and non-chaotic environment with our subjects with like completely untouched by the outside world. And then Murphy's Law plays out, and it can happen, will happen, and you have to adjust and amend. But they're going off of like these like hard binary rules of, like, you said, we don't use straps, or you said we don't do this. Unless this, in that situation, and you were there, like, you can feel that, like, the athlete didn't want to let me down by not going up in weight, and all later to be able to do it is to use straps. So that was the response to it. And it's about being human in those moments. You know, how do you work through that with someone working with you or under you, and that, like, yeah, we have rules till those rules no longer are practical or even pertinent to the environment, and then we adjust. It's an amendment.
Man, so again, I'm gonna come back to this book you wrote, How to Become a Strength Coach, the other day. Can you systematize your decision making? I think you when you're working in groups, and you have a big background of working with different size groups, when you're working with the swim and dive team at 5 o'clock in the morning and you have 60 athletes, you have to systematize your decision making. It has to be ABC, and you got to be able to roll. If not, you're screwed, man. It's going to get out of hand real quick, and it's going to go bad, right? So I think there's a book called Laws of Simplicity that I've read a couple times. It's by an MIT guy, John Medea. I think that's how you say his last name. But it's basically, what can we simplify to make our decisions like streamlined? And to me, that's what it is, man. I'm trying to teach a GA or an intern what to look for, you know. So for me, there's key points, man. I'm always going to talk about ankles, knees, hips, internal, external rotation. So if you're watching from like a sagittal view, or you're watching from frontal, or, you know, whatever you're looking for, these are the exact things that I'm looking for, and that's why I can make the changes on the fly that I'm going to make.
And assuming, let's say that as a person working under you have aspirations working with basketball, and that note of like teasing back and forth between general and speak, and you kind of just mentioned, like, if you just mentioned a start for me work with basketball, and you started naming like ankle, knee, thoracic, and internal, external rotation, like, I'm kind of like piecing together, okay, maybe it does work with basketball. Wouldn't that be a universal thing? And with that person that's with you for a specific reason, managing them to go, like, this is specific to what they need right now versus specifically to basketball is relevant in a larger context. But today is this, like, it's specific to the needs. So working with that young coach or that person that maybe got thrust over, like, hey, he's good for recruiting, or he has this connection, you're going to be stuck with him in the weight room. And that, like, ability to tease in and out between general and specific, but it's like, it's not just like black and white, yin and yang. It's very crossover and they're kind of intersected. So, you know, working through that, and because I looking at a lot of your stuff, it's like, you know, looking at your journals and the descriptions and the ability to, like, work through a thought or some sort of theory. It's any given moment, I'm like, because that's specific to basketball, but that's not really specific to anything. So it's like, it's not necessarily general, but it's still specific eventually. So you walk me through that process of specificity for you at, relatively speaking, to the things that you're focusing on day to day.
Man, I have 2 thoughts for you. I wrote them down just so I don't forget. But one is a phrase, generally specific and specifically general, right? So again, man, there's this huge continuum. You start out and you start to hear like sports specific training, right? And to me, I don't know if that exists, man. An athlete is an athlete, you know. There's intricacies when someone starts shooting the ball or hitting the ball or kicking, all that different kind of stuff. But I think you can't really break rules until you know them. You talked about that a little bit earlier, right? So to me, there's the principles of, and once you have the principles, you know, you can make adjustments from there, you know. So I want whoever comes in to work with me to see it general first. This is a human, this is an athlete. And then as we progress, I want to start building into, like, this is basketball specific, and then we progress a little more, and then I want to get into individual specific. This guy's 7 foot, this guy's 5'10", this guy has a 7'4" wingspan, this guy has a 6'4" wingspan, this guy's femur's longer than this guy, and then we start breaking those things down. And I think so. I was mentored by Jim Radcliffe at Oregon, and I was blown away. The first time I walked into the weight room, I didn't say a word, I just watched, right? And then the longer I was there, the more I could say and the more I could ask, right? But he left me with so many little nuggets. He would ask me, what do you notice how that guy stands? Like, how is his shirt? What's the tension on his shirt? Is he standing on his left leg, his right leg? And when I first heard that, I was like, what are you talking about? Like, he's just standing, you know? He's like, have you ever noticed this guy's always has his left foot like externally rotated? Nope, I've never noticed that. You know, fast forward, I got to spend a little time around Dan Path, and we're in Arizona, and he's watching a sprinter, he's watching a jumper, long jumper, a high jumper, and in real time, he says, hey, can you see the hips, oscillating left to right or whatever? And he says, can you see how this guy plants his foot? And I'm like, in real time, no, I can't see that stuff. I mean, he's an elite mind, elite thinker, elite coach. But it challenged me to, how do I take athletes and slow down movements in real time so I can see that? So visual picture for you. I know you like visuals. So let's just say we have a sprinter running across the track. You take a freeze frame, Altus calls these kilograms, I think. But now I look almost like a target. So I see the hips, and then there's a circle that goes outside that. It goes a little wider to the low back, and then it goes to the thoracic, then it goes to the shoulder, and it just basically a target. And it helps me to see from the inside out, and other people might go from the outside in. But for me, that's my filter now from my experience of Radcliffe and Path and these guys that I've got to be around, of how I see an athlete. And I just try to pass that on to people that are around me and just ask them what they see. And conversation is the way to do it, man. It's like, it's humbly asking the question, like, what do you see? What don't you see? I mean, to me, there's no dumb questions. And if you're not willing to learn, man, you're behind already.
So I'm taking an outsider view right now, specifically basketball strength conditioning. There's elements that feel like 90s and early 2000s football. Let's create a formula here. What can the squat, bench, clean, whatever the equivalent is, right? Then there's other elements of maybe lying, say that Todd Wright now have pound influence on basketball strength conditioning, and they kind of like create like the two camps. And then there's a third of like being attached to the basketball coach and being the conceivably hearing to the basketball coach, right? You hit your wagon to a person like that, and you get to a really high level, and you completely will change the trajectory of whatever you're earning. There's a lot of directions and avenues, but it kind of goes more into like you're attached to a basketball coach, and that's you're hitching your wagon to that. But with that being said, is what you described with leveraging the Coach Radcliffe's perspective or Coach Path's perspective into coherent things that you can execute on in your practice. One question I have, and with any basketball coach you've worked with, their nomenclature and their perspective on athleticism or the continuum of like high skill versus really raw power and out just being a great athlete. And where do you marry the two of like, okay, I have this idea of running and jumping and change direction, and they have an idea of closeouts and getting up a great zero step in terms of like getting to the hole faster, whatever that like thing or buzz thing of like so working through the biomechanics and being a biomechanical expert, but also being a biomechanical person for your department and your staff that translates a lot of the messaging and deciphers it and compiles it into something that's coherent and valuable for the players on a day-to-day basis. That he's not quick off the this aspect, or he doesn't get in a low enough stand. Where do you process that information? They have their definitions and nomenclature and their perspective with what you see in the weight room and all the people you've learned from.
Big time, man. It's a great thought. So for me, maybe I'm super fortunate. I was at Liberty for 7 years, and we played a very controlled game possession-wise. I come to Alabama, and we play one of the fastest paces in the country. Our tempo, it's just part of what we do. So to me, I think it's a conversation with the head coach on what do you want out of the weight room? What do you want that to look like? What do you want it to feel like? And I've been fortunate to have great relationships with both head coaches I've worked for. And man, it's the basketball weight room has a different vibe than any other weight room to me anyway, right? So it's building these kind of like feels and vibes in the weight room that match what we're trying to do on the court, you know? Um, and then I think further, when you have individual athletes, and to me, this is why I used to think you come into my weight room and you see everything lined up like a military, and everybody's doing hang cleans and everybody's doing it at the same sequence and the same timing, and I'm blowing my whistle, and that I was a great strength coach. And I did that at Liberty, like 6 a.m. That's how we had to start it. The longer I went, the more flexible I got in my approach, where you come in and we might have 2 guys doing a different workout. Now there's 3 different programs, which gets chaotic, and you can come in and say, man, that guy's a shit strength coach because he got no control over the weight room. And it doesn't look as clean, but I feel like we're learning more and we're progressing more. So long as a coach understands this is what it's going to look like and feel like for our guys, if a coach wants to come in and see organization and military, then you might have to do it a different way, So I don't know, man. I'd like to dig in on that. I'd like to hear your perspective, but that's my experience there.
Well, and I mean, it's very pertinent in my life now, where I've added another element to my business of custom semi-private, where I do small groups. And you just described, it's like you can come in for a normal large group class I have, and you'll see it very militant and very top down and very particular program. And we'll have our amendments. If it hurts, we don't do it. If they can't do it, we have some sort of lateralization. But the other end of it now is, okay, now I'm doing a custom program, and it might be anywhere from 3 to 5 programs that are completely novel and unique to that person. And, first, when you're going through that much like nuance in your program, the first thing you're asking is, like, as a coach, why do they program such drastically different things for such drastically different people? Or are they better served just doing the same program? And then 2, am I more effective as a coach for doing one thing versus am I less effective doing multiple things that are more specific to what that person needs? And I think it just forces you to really think in a level that your programming needs to be clear and understood by the user if it's different. So that's the first step. If they don't feel like there's a rationale or some sort of criteria to doing it, they're not going to believe in it anyway. And the other part is, like, am I more effective with one program or multiple programs? I think the biggest thing when you go to multiple programs going into simultaneously is, like, you got to have trust and you have to deliver agency, right? You look at your clients or your athletes working out. Like, I trust you. I'm going to tell you what you're going to do. Here's why we're doing it. It's in your best interest, but it's going to be different than the person to the left and right of you. I trust you that you know why we're doing it and you're going to give your best effort. And the other part is, like, serenity now. Like, I am looking at you knowing you can be perfect. I'm not going to be afraid to take a risk and just doing things that I think you're already good at. For instance, like, you get a track kid, you're like, all right, we're just going to do A skips and B skips. They don't need you for that, right? You're not pushing boundaries at all. Versus you get them in the weight room, like, I'm going to really break down some of these Olympic lifts and some of these squat movements and some of these patterns because you need me to push the threshold here and push these boundaries for you. And the same thing with, like, whether it's motor patterns or getting strength or getting some body compositional changes or working something that's novel, unique, or balance, proprioception. Could I lead in a moment have a 22-year-old and I have a 50-year-old working at the same time, and they look like polar opposites, and it's such a different mentality. Sometimes the older person feeds off the younger person, and sometimes the younger person needs to, like, calm down a little bit and settle in. I want you to do workmanlike. I want you to hit your reps, get your depth, all this stuff. But it's that balance between two. But the thing you described about evolution as a coach, and you see this quite a bit with basketball, is that, like, I always tell everybody, like, you're going to go from being an Olympic assistant or a football assistant, you take basketball, like, the workload doesn't drop. You just expand your potential things you do in a given day to be more accommodating for less people. And same thing I'm doing right now. Like, my workload has not dropped. In fact, it's increased, but it's the expansion in other areas. It's fun. It's engaging. It's really, really impactful for me. But the note of it is, like, not less than because this person's going to perfect at it right away. I'm more committed than ever to make sure that they get that grasp of it. The example I talked about was, like, well, we did, lateral, we're doing change direction work, and do a lateral A skip. And if you're seeing a football player do that, like, it's not pretty. They're just stiff. They don't have any frontal plane mobility. They lack the motor control. Like, doing a lateral band walk with them is not the easiest thing in the world, right? And finding that, like, you got 2 glasses of water in your shoulder, like, keeping that level, or don't open up your lead foot, or like push off your trail leg, or hey, I want you to go from shoulder width to hip width, shoulder width to hip width, and then increasing the speed, amplitude, and overall like control dynamics. But talk to 10 out of 10 strength coaches football, like, abandoned it. It's not working. It's like shit. Versus you look at someone's like growth mindset, they're like, wow, I just found a window of opportunity here. Basketball guys aren't weight room guys, right? And everything's going to suck before it's good, right? It's all going to be bad for a while. And then I see physical development, or I don't suck at this as much as I once did. And it's like a paradigm shift for them. And they're like, okay, I see the value here. I feel stronger. I feel better in the core. I feel more resilient. I feel like I'm recovering faster from getting practices. I don't feel like I'm completely getting pushed around in the pain. And like all these milestone wins. And that thing of like, that's why we do it. It's exactly why we do it. Like that concept there is like, so it's, you gotta be comfortable and have a lot of confidence with coaching. Shit, like, I'm okay with that. I'm completely fine with that. Like, if I'd only did something we're good at, would it be very effective with my ability to change someone?
Tim, there was a lot of good stuff right there, man. I wrote a ton down. So, one, the conversation I have with my athletes is there's a cost of doing business, right? So you come in and you want to add some lean muscle. Well, this is boring, man. Like, you're going to come in and you're going to do the same thing over and over and over and over. We might have some variation, but I think our society and maybe the generation, I don't know, has trouble with just like being relentlessly consistent. And that's it, man. It's like, there's no fireworks. You can make it look hype on YouTube or Instagram or whatever you want, but you come in and you do the work, man. You do the reps, right? So that was my first thought. And it's a hard conversation because it is and it isn't. I'll come in. Let's say we're working on a strength phase, right? Hey, the cost of doing business is you're gonna be sore, man, like real sore, like and you're not gonna want to come back tomorrow, but you have to, right? And then we're gonna do that again, and you're gonna feel like shit again, and then we're gonna do it again. You know, we're gonna be strategic, but this is the mode we're in right now, right? And I think that's a tough sell sometimes, especially to basketball players, because, you know, you start going old school. Is it going to mess up my shot? Is it going to, you know, whatever? No, it's not. But you're going to have to get past this hard period, right? So that's like the first thought I had there. You talked about the paradigm shift. Are you familiar with Dr. Matt Jordan's loading parameter table? Okay, so that I love. I use it as a visual. So I try to communicate to our guys that the exercises we're doing don't determine the adaptation, right? The application, you know, how we do it, how we load it, how fast we move it, that sort of thing. And these are the things I assume that everybody I worked with was going to have a super high training age, and they were going to understand this stuff. And this is when we go heavy, and this is horsepower, and this is speed, and this is power. And it didn't work that way, you know? So now I'm teaching and coaching. We're doing this for a specific reason. And there's going to be a progression to it. And I know you want to jump up and do whatever you saw because it looks cool. But this is boring, man. This is a lunge, or this is a step up, or this is whatever. So I don't know. You said so much there, man. And I wrote down just little pieces of it: paradigm shift, and the cost of doing business, and adaptation, application. So that I got a lot going on. So you just keep pulling strings.
Well, it's amazing you bring up the adding lean muscle. There's like an element of you have extreme case studies in like that. Like, some people have reached the level of getting 300 pounds at 3% body fat with more muscle mass than any human could ever physically comprehend. Right? There's like that. Like, that is a case study that is hard to process, right? And it's like more so than like you watch someone do Olympic lifting, like, you know, like Nam Sudamano being jerking 4 times his body weight has less of an understanding than someone reaching 300 pounds, right? Like, that seems like a level of effort and consistency that is more relatable. Nam Sudamano, which you would never see the model doing 4 times his body weight and clean jerk, is beyond comprehension. Or like Usain Bolt running a 9.67. Like, these things are just, okay, that's really fast, or that's really big. And then you start to look at, okay, well, what the common thread here is that they had fanatical level focused on running across a line faster or getting to a certain level of body mass and body composition. It's not wavering. It's not distracting. It's being very conscious of your single goal. Acyclical sports or basketball or football, like, don't have that luxury of just getting myopic focus on. We can learn from them. We can learn from them, and like, they are the best in the world doing that one thing. And we can parlay the 10 while still being very conscious of the fact that we still have a bunch of other things we do. But the zeroing in, like, what they do better than anyone else, just focus on a particular task. You have incredible level of focus and detail towards that particular outcome. If they don't need it, they don't meet their goal, they have to revisit their plan. They're going to refine and improve. And the same thing for us, right? You want to play basketball at the next level, and they're all bigger and stronger. You want to play baseball at the next level, they're all bigger and stronger. You can all throw a 95. They can all hit the ball really hard, but they're all bigger and stronger. So, like, for us to be from here or there, like, we're going to leverage what those guys do really well while still working some things. So it might slow down progress, which we get to it, but the note of that, it's pretty simple formula. You know, like, eat more, train, put your body in attention, and no one said this could be fun or comfortable. And it's okay. And then the avoidance of when it does reach that critical moment of fun or comfortable is not fighting that urge to do something different or try to negotiate the process. It's like, this is time tested and proven. It's a very simple formula, like not wavering under the pressure that you're feeling right now. And it's like, your shot is going to, I never said your shot's going to be better from being bigger and stronger. I just said you're a better basketball player. You know, that's the deal here. And it's like, we agreed at one point. One thing that we did at Army, and I took it from, I went and visited Iowa, and they did what they call a Premortem with the basketball or the football team there. And they talked about what are some reasons why we can't win Big Ten this year, right? And just list 3 reasons why we can't win it. You know, like working through why wouldn't they win the Big Ten? And I did that with Army football. Like, why can't we beat Navy this year? Like, you start listening, going fast enough, we're not strong enough, we're not disciplined. I think there's some pushback on the company. It's a problem, but okay, I'm tacked out a little bit more. We hit 4th down or 4th quarter, we made some mental errors. I'm like, okay, so maybe not making good decisions under fatigue, or you're overly stressed, maybe do, or maybe it's just, and we're not practicing the way we want to, right? So let's start to reverse engineer now. So one of the first ones we talked about was getting faster. I was like, it's a very simple formula. We're going to sprint 2 to 3 times a week. We got to get stronger relative to body mass, and we got to make sure that we don't have any setbacks by getting injured. And one of the biggest things that I find is a limiting factor of getting faster is soft tissue injuries. And one of the biggest causative factors for soft tissue injuries is probably guys being dehydrated and adequately warmed up, or being not getting enough rest, right? And we start to look at the causative factors of soft tissue injury in football for an athlete trying to sprint multiple times a week are more lifestyle and stuff outside the weight room. It's like, so if it is a limiting factor, would you be willing to give up drinking on the weekends? Would you be willing to go to bed earlier? Would you be willing to hydrate more throughout the day? Like, remember, it's not my goal, it's your goal. It's yours. So if you're unwilling to make any compromises outside the weight room, knowing that's a formula, and knowing the biggest limiting factor to our formula that will be able to get to that outcome, then we're talking in circles here. We're not really making any headway because you're unwilling to compromise on anything outside the gym. And you're putting too much pressure and responsibility on me to deliver on something that I can't unless you're willing to give me something in the middle. And that same feeling of like, my shot's not what it's doing. It's not feeling good. I couldn't get 100 shots out without my legs feeling completely damaged because I squatted, I did pendulum squat, I did all these other things. Like, yeah, but we talked about at the beginning of the offseason, you're not big enough and strong enough. Like, we're going to eventually have to pay the piper at some point. We don't want to do it in November. We need to do it now in May. Like, why does it matter if we're making every single shot right now? Who cares? Okay, like, is an NBA scout going to come to the gym and say, well, wow, why don't we have this guy in the roster right now? You know, like, I mean, like, it's a very odd and very interesting thing. It comes down to, like, I just don't like the I don't like the sacrifice. I like the sacrifice on my terms. And that process is really difficult to unpack for, an athlete. Like, who wants to feel that way? I tell our coaches, we're doing stuff for people who can or won't. We have to figure out really quickly which one it is. If they won't, it's motivational science, right? We got to incentivize. We got to connect to them. We got to frame it and make sense for if they want. If they can't, then we got to figure out if it's biomechanical and physiological limitation. We're talking about what's better progression for movement capacity what's a better option for that person, whether it's a squat, hinge, lunge, rotation, reach, or pull. And then we look at the next level. If like they can't recover from the adaptation, then when we go a little bit smaller incremental loads increases, or if we get lower frequency, or maybe we do less total volume, but that it falls into those kind of two camps for us. And we got to just figure out quick as opposed to later. And it kind of breaks us off of like job priorities, the motivation and skill continuum, like high motivation, high skill, like throw the kitchen sink out of them, low motivation, low skill, like give them some small incremental win to make them feel like they are getting progress somehow, some way. But, you know, to touch on what you just described of that, we're salesmen. We're walking into a weight room trying to sell someone, and this is the path to them getting to everything they ever wanted. And like, not intuitive. No, like they're saying, okay, I'm going to squat with you and I'm going to feel like crap today for something better in the future. Like, yes. Yeah. Believe that's the process.
Man, I'm with all that, man. I think so much too is that, like, even in this podcast, right? Like, you know, whoever listens to, man, I want to know what he does, like what the programming is like. Like, I'm an open book, man. Like, you can come visit anytime you want. Call me, email me, text me. I'll get back to you. All right. The work is the work. You know, it's simple but not easy, cliche, whatever. Most people think like, hey, I'm going to give you this program, and in 4 weeks or 6 weeks or 8 weeks, you're going to do this, you know, like, man, so there's so much nuance to it when you start digging in, and there's X's and O's, man. Like, I listened to your pod with Alan Bishop. He's one of my good friends on contraction, right? So you can get into the weeds on contraction types and omni-contraction, and I love all of it. But at the end of the day, what you just talked about, how athletes and their lifestyle and how they start to connect the dots, that's where I think I've done a good job of helping my guys connect the dots. You know, I'm a good strength coach. I aspire to be great, you know, so I'm still learning, still processing, still investigating. But man, the way that I communicate with guys and try to give them the real is where I think the superpower, the magic, it's not in my programming. It's not, like, if we both wrote a program, they're pretty similar. Like, at the end of the day, we might have a couple of little details that are different, but at the end of the day, most people are doing the same thing. And we can talk about fascia and we can talk about omni contraction. Did you do the work or did you not do the work? All right. Okay. Let's start panning down the limiting factors you talked about. That to me is gold, man. What is your limiting factor? Eliminate it and let's move on. I think sometimes for me, because this is how I operate, this is how I communicate. I'm not going to cuss you out. You don't want to work? Don't work. There's the door. Go. Like, no problem. Like, this is your deal. I'm trying to help you, right? I've learned right now about myself, I'm not for everyone and everyone's not for me. And that's totally okay. We can still work together. We can communicate. We can have a friendship, whatever. But I operate a certain way. And maybe it's just getting older. Hey, that's just, it is what it is. I'm not a cheerleader in here, you know? The most intense situation I've ever been in is watching my wife birth a child, right? And there was nobody in there freaking out, yelling, hooting, hollering. The doctor came in, he did his work, shook my hand, and he got out, and I had a kid. No bells and whistles, man. Like, just do the job. So I don't know, soapbox right there, but what?
And the amount that can go wrong in that situation too. Right. There's no stakes in our world that it can come close to that. And the composure, the discipline in that moment, and knowing that there's all sorts of things you're having to account for, right? Your blood pressure, yeah, blood glucose levels, like when she passed out because she maintained her breathing, is the pain too much? She's wrong. When she got that epidural, like with the contraction rate, everything going on, and that level of composure in that situation. Now, the other thing that's interesting about that is like, there's no going out, right? You know, it's like, there's no, I'm going to stop. I don't enjoy this anymore, right? Agency or choice in that moment, which, you know, in that level of once you commit and you start the workout, like, give everything you got because you're here. And why would you just arbitrarily stop? Because it's not fun or convenient for you anymore. And like that level of it. But you mentioned in that, like, everything's going to be kind of similar. And, you know, Dan John talked about like all programs are like Mexican food. They're either some sort of combination of tortilla, rice, beans, and meat. Like, it's that, right? Like, it doesn't matter if it's burrito or taco. Like, it doesn't, they're the same constituents, right? We're the squat, push, pull, and hinge, right? Like, it really doesn't have much nuance or anything. It's different. is the way we deliver it, with the hospitality which is delivered, with the story behind it, right? There's an element of pageantry that's associated with it. Just human skill of like understanding or reading people. Like, today we're going to squat, and squat's going to be the most important thing that's ever happened to you. We're going to cure cancer with this one exercise and each sets of reps, and it's the answer and unlocking it. Versus we're just going to squat. And like that, like whether you believe in that or not, but the lock and key to all of this is understanding what drives people to do anything and leaning in on that, not exploiting it, but leaning in on it, getting to really want them to do it. And that there's no convincing someone to do something they don't want to do. They're just either finding a situation that's in their best interest and incentivized for them to do it, or having a conversation of like, you may not want to do it, but someone else wants to, and they might have an advantage over you. So make a choice. I'm thinking,
Man, I want to pull on one string, man. You used the word agency a couple times, and I love it, man. I've heard it at graduations. I've heard it at business meetings. For me, agency is the responsibility, the feeling of the integrity. I think you guys talked about rep integrity on the contraction pod, but agency to me, that's the gold right there. That's the goal. We can program and all that, but agency, your ownership of responsibility. To me, it comes down to that as a strength coach and as an athlete.
Yeah, I come from a football background where you spend a lot of time. People know things about football. It's so hard for a lot of people on the outside to have a really just any kind of understanding. Like, there's a significant lack of trust with every single athlete you work with, right? You look at it from the day-to-day itinerary, it's all scripted. There's no agency there. There's no belief if they're going to do something unless told. And it's this fear that, yeah, it's a big army and there's a lot of moving parts and you got to have organizational structure, but it's scripted. Yeah. Every minute of every day. And there's consequence if you don't do it. Like, we'll do it over again, or you'll get some sort of punishment. That's not a relationship of trust. It's a marriage of convenience, that I need you to do what I'm asking you to do when I tell you to do it, because it's the only way this operates, versus they should have an inner desire to do something because they want to be the best football player they can possibly be, because whether it's I can make generational wealth, or I get the recognition, my legacy, whatever the narrative you want to play into it, there's no belief. There's no belief you're going to do it unless I have it written down, scripted, and there's some sort of accountability associated. So it's like devoid agency. And once I enter the private sector, is they have complete control of when and where they go and who they go with. They might be inferior. They might not have the same credentials, the same level of ability, skill, or knowledge, but they can still choose the inferior version of this based off of variables that make more sense from a convenience standpoint, from a relationship standpoint, from an understanding standpoint. It's not until you face that dilemma of people can buy or not buy what you're selling and have choice, that you realize the view of how you train football players was completely devoid of trust in any relationship. They did it because they had to. And I like to pride myself on the athletes I coach in football were there because they believed I was giving them an advantage, but I never really could test it. I never really could figure or understand that. And I think a lot of times now, what we're looking at, the fears associated with modern college athletics, is the loss of control, where it was an illusion of control to begin with. They're demonstrating a quiet mutiny and some sort of resistance to what you're telling them to do in some way, whether it's you're on the whistle and they're skipping steps and trying to get some water, or they know the boundaries and what they're going to get in trouble with, and they find that boundary early, or they're just going to do what everyone else is doing in the rack and not get noticed, and not pushing yourself to the degree, or they're not trying to come in last, or they're going a little bit slower to not knock over a cone or miss a line, and they're not giving everything, mind, body, and spirit to every single training session. And yeah, there's some really great coaches out there that have an amazing ability to get people motivated to do something that they never thought imaginable. And you look at them as to why they're so impactful with their athletes. I think it's just a simple thing of like, they just trust that they're there for the right reasons. And, whether that's a limiting factor for football or not, I don't know. But I think with basketball, I work with basketball. what I did with football was not applicable to working with Michigan. It was a different conversation. And I think it was stored outside of football, really. It's like, okay, like, I don't care how much you know to, you know how much you care. Like, that's one aspect. But the other note is like, hey, here's our workout. Here's what we do. Here's why we're doing it. I believe that you're going to give your best effort doing it. And if you choose not to do it, it's 100% on you. And if you don't want to do it because you believe in it, talk to me. What would be better for you? Like, I trust your opinion on this. And I work now in the private sector where I ask all the time, what's good, what's bad? What can I do better? How can I make this a better experience for you? Are we getting to where you want to get as fast as you want to get there? And if not, what do I need to change? And especially with baseball and hockey, how do you throw a ball faster? How do you swing it back faster? How do you skate? How do you do a one-timer? How do you do a slap shot? I don't know. I don't know how to do it. Walk me through it. And okay, here's how I think I could reverse engineer making you more capable in the field or ice or court. But give me some train of thought here. And the vulnerability of I don't know, teach me. And then I'm like, okay, here's how I think we should do it. And you have very good experience. You're like, no, okay, well, let's get some lifetime feedback and that ability to just collaborate, right? Communicate and just work together. That's been some of the biggest lessons for me.
Man, what I heard was just trust and responsibility. I mean, at the end of the day, trust and responsibility on both parties.
Yeah. I do want to get one more question for you, if it's okay. I think this is the thing that I always want to make sure that I get across to coaches. How do you know if you're doing a good job or not?
Two ways for me. I mean, you got objective feedback. You're on the force plate. I mean, are you jumping higher? Are you jumping faster? Are you producing more force? Are you running faster? GPS, whatever. So we have those objective markers. For me, we talked about trust and relationship. I ask guys, how do you feel? Are you playing better? Are you moving better? It's cool to see progression, So I have 4 kids and my son is a solid athlete, man. He's a small guard, but over the last 4 years, he's progressively got a little bit more explosive, a little bit bouncier, and so he's dunking and he's starting to add some little sauce to his dunks, right? So he sees and he feels it, and we have documentation of he can just do more, right? So that's a very simple example, but I want athletes to feel and tell me man, I feel like I can do more. I feel like I did, I'm starting to reach different levels. And that to me is the ultimate validation of I'm doing my job at a high level, right? I'm going to go back to Radcliffe a little bit. I learned early on, I thought I was going to go into a weight room and just help everybody. This program is the best, right? Well, he said, this guy already runs a 4.3. What else are we going to do to help him be the best football player he could be? And that was a football weight room. And I was like, wow, yeah, you're right. So how do we make him more resilient? You can look at injury rates at the end of the year. Were guys available to play? That's one marker. The thing I try not to do is base my worth on wins and losses. And I did that early, and it was really hard. I took it personal. We don't win games, and I just, they weren't ready to play. It's my fault. And that's part of wanting to be great, man. You want to win, and so you can get wrapped up in that. But for me, it's individual progress. I want to have a little objective data, and then I want to have the athlete's definition or description of how I'm playing better. So that's my answer.
It's also interesting in that wins and losses comment. I think that's kind of one of the things over time when you realize it's expected more be able to win, it becomes less of the focal point. It's more of the day-to-day. I usually think there's a healthy amount of people who need to focus more on their impact of wins and losses and not completely deferring, just absolving themselves of any responsibility of we didn't get good enough recruits, or we don't have really good on the court coaches. And that complete avoidance of any responsibility whatsoever, I don't think is healthy either.
Yeah.
And in those moments, really bad. I like to take more accountability for the losses. And I think it's the kind of the absolute biggest burden of strength coach. We take more responsibility at the loss and less credit for the win. It's just the natural order of things, whether it's the way we've been instructed to operate or that. But do you think we should have a lot of coaches out there and we shouldn't be completely deferring it to someone else's fault and not accepting your role of that? Typically, like, are the top 5 guys who started at the beginning of the season still playing at the end of the season? And if they did, and you still lost, okay, well, resiliency wasn't. There's one check mark that you say that you're not the bigger problem for it. If guys are producing force and are maintaining their correlated things like jumping height and overall speed, change direction ability towards the latter half of the season, and you expose them to enough stress in the weight room or manage their stress in practice over the course of the year to be able to be at their peak physical form at the end of the season, yeah, you did your job. If it still comes out with like, yeah, we lost a lot more games than we won. Yeah, then it probably is a tactical problem for sure. But like, just to say, like, not my fault. Like, I did my part. Like, do you really know? Like, are you just saying that because you don't want to take on the responsibility? Well, then you're not going to make 6 figures and you don't deserve it, right? Because that's the key. Like, when you tie yourself to bigger outcomes, the compensation follows. And it's that avoidance of it. Why are you making $40,000 a year? Because you're not really associating your level of impact with the level of outcome necessitated for that kind of wage or that kind of responsibility. Why ADs and head coaches make what they make because they blame for everything. And I think if you have that mindset on it, like you should, I think I can impact those losses. And to your point, Coach Radcliffe, which is right, like you guys are running a 4.3. Like, well, imagine if Ferrari took that same perspective. Like, we're the fastest car in the world. What's the point of keep trying to like go through R&D? Like, we can make our cars more resilient. We can make them better fuel efficiency. We can improve the quality of the driver by giving them better tactical and better technical skill. We can improve part of our whole pit crew and our mechanics and our engineers. We can get better practice, better training. We could do all sorts of stuff, right? And like, just because you have the fastest car in the world doesn't mean we should stop. And like, I looked at that the same way we are guys are SC. Like, we have some fairly fast guys. We had Marquise Lee, Robert Woods, George Farmer. We have guys that could really run fast. But are they going to get hurt left and right? Rob Woods walked like a duck, and Marquise Lee made a lot of mental errors for, I think, lack of fitness. George Farmer was very, very injury prone guy. So what do? We start to work on the week. And whether you get into receptions, really hard to tell, but that was this mind. Like, I'm not going to just rest on our laurel because we're super fast guys and we've done our job. I want to have a bigger impact here. And the other thing now too is like not just choosing random things to make yourself feel valuable, right? Like I can easily make it worse by doing some things that are different and not really related to performance, right? Like he's still got to run routes at a high level and he's still got to be able to change direction, still got to catch the ball. He's still got to be able to block and do all these things. Okay, well, not getting like a David Botson, like he's already really fast and explosive, just getting 270 pounds. There's that like fear of that, like he's just kind of going off the rails and not really doing what's necessary anymore. Like, okay, absolutely, I have a responsibility to maintain your course here. But I do agree with the notion of like, once you reach a certain point, like I'd imagine in football, like a guy like Tommy Moffett wakes up every day going, okay, I'm going to do a good job today. Because he has a pedigree that there's a consistent pattern. Wherever he's at, they win and they do really well, whether you agree with this philosophy or not. There's a pattern of him. And I think he probably wakes up every day. I need to be excellent today. That's all I'm really worried about. And if I'm stacking a lot of good days, the outcome will be what I want, which is, I think, earned, not given. And when you're starting out early, you should have that big moonshot level of perspective. Like, I'm going to win a national championship and I'm going to do that through my program. And the Holy Grail is what? Like from, X's and O's in the weight room and like making these amazing impacts on each one of your athletes. And it's going to do a lot of 10 to 20 seasons for a long time. And it's okay to, and having grace and humility in that process. And, I did the best I could, but I can do better.
I'm with, man. I'm with.
Yeah, this is sweet, man. Well, I appreciate you taking the time, man. This is a fun conversation. I really thank you.
Yeah, man, I appreciate you having me on. Like, no gas at all, man. Like your books have really challenged me to think deep, man. And that's, to me, I'm a processor, man. I'm going to put my notes together. I'll send them to you. Send them out however you want. But I literally write everything down. I'm visual. But we'll be in touch for sure, man. Like I got some stuff I'm going to throw at you, just see how you think about it. But maybe we'll really get a little more detailed on what we want to do. But thank you, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you.